High on a hill shrouded in mist, there stood a dark building known to everyone in the area, the Asylum. Closed for over 30 years after a mysterious fire, it had become home to terrifying stories and whispers of troubled spirits. On that rainy night, three friends, Lucas, Clara, and Raphael, decided to face their fears and explore the place. It was a challenge between them, something that was supposed to be just an adventure. Lucas led the group, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Clara held a camera, ready to capture anything unusual, and Raphael, ever the skeptic, laughed at the tension of the other two. As they approached the entrance, the sound of the rain seemed to diminish, as if the air itself were getting heavier. The large wooden door creaked as it was pushed open, revealing a dark, musty hallway. On the floor were burn marks and scattered papers with illegible words. Lucas's flashlight began to flicker. "This is just the beginning," Clara whispered as a cold sensation ran through their spine. The moment they entered the main hall, the door behind them slammed shut, as if an invisible force had decided to seal their entrance. The darkness seemed to pulse around them as if the building itself were alive. The sound of footsteps echoed, but none of them moved. "It was just the echo," Raphael said, trying to hide his nervousness. Clara adjusted the camera, pointing it at the peeling walls. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the hallways. It wasn't human. It was a high-pitched, distorted sound that seemed to come from all sides. They stopped, frozen. Lucas tried to shine his light down the hallway ahead, but his flashlight failed. Only the glow of Clara's camera guided them now. They decided to follow the sound, even though their minds screamed at them to do otherwise. Each footstep resounded like a drum in the silence. When they reached the end of the hallway, they found a room with rusty wheelchairs and deep marks on the walls, as if something or someone had tried to scratch them out. Clara pointed the camera at a hanging picture, twisted and covered in dust. It was a photo of a group of patients, but something was wrong. People's expressions were erratic. A woman's face in the corner seemed to move. Clara rubbed her eyes, thinking it was an illusion. "Did you see that?" she asked, but Lucas and Raphael shook their heads. Suddenly, the door to the room closed by itself. They rushed to open it, but it wouldn't budge. In the back of the room, a low sound began to grow louder. It was laughter. A hoarse, inhuman laughter that seemed to come from the walls. Clara's camera caught something, a figure standing in the background wearing an old nurse's uniform. When she tried to focus, the figure disappeared. The air seemed to grow colder, and Clara felt as if invisible hands were gripping her shoulders. Lucas began to scream. "We need to get out of here now." They ran for the door, which finally gave way with a snap. But the hallway was different now. It seemed longer, the walls narrower, as if the building were shifting to trap them 3 pairs of feet. There were too many. A whispering voice called out to them, "You shouldn't be here." The corridor seemed to stretch on forever. The group ran, but each step seemed heavier, as if the ground was pulling them down. The lights on Clara's camera began to fail, flickering frantically, illuminating only fragments of what was around them. Bloody hands marked on the walls, shadows moving without a defined shape. Lucas stopped suddenly, panting. "Wait, we're running in circles." He pointed to a door they had already passed before. Raphael couldn't believe it. "That's impossible, Lucas. We're still going straight." As they argued, the sound of chains dragging on the floor echoed. Something was approaching. Clara, still with the camera on, pointed to the end of the corridor. The sound stopped. In the darkness, 2 red eyes glowed. A tall, misshapen figure began to crawl out of the shadows. She was wearing an old asylum worker's uniform, but her face was partially burned with deep scars. His voice was hoarse and full of pain. "You came to stay." Lucas tried to pull Clara and Raphael to keep running, but the figure raised an arm and suddenly, an invisible force threw them against the walls. Raphael began to scream, but his voice disappeared into the air, as if the sound was sucked into the environment. Clara tried to record, but the camera was ripped from her hands and fell to the floor, breaking. "It's not real, it's not real," Clara whispered, trying to convince herself. The figure began to advance slowly, while the whispers around them turned into deafening screams. Suddenly, Lucas saw a door in the background, different from the others. It had a weak light escaping from its edges. He gathered all his strength and shouted, "That door! Let's go!" The 3 of them ran as best they could, fighting against the force that seemed to want to keep them there. When they reached the door, it didn't move. Raphael, desperate, began to hit her, while Lucas and Clara tried to push her away. The figure was getting closer and closer. At the last moment, the door opened with a bang and they were thrown out. They fell onto the rain-soaked ground. The air finally seemed normal and the sound of screams disappeared. When they looked back, the asylum had disappeared. Only an empty hill remained, shrouded in mist. Did that really happen? Clara murmured. Lucas grabbed her arm and pulled her away. It doesn't matter. Let's not talk about it. Ever. As the group walked away, Clara noticed something strange. The camera, which she was sure had broken, was next to her, intact. Trembling, she picked it up but didn't dare watch the recordings. Instead, she threw the camera into the nearby river where it sank in the current. Far away in a dark room, an old monitor blinked. Images of them in the asylum began to play, while a low laugh echoed across the screen. As they walked away from the hill, the trio walked in silence, with the torrential rain disguising the tears of fear and relief on their faces. Each step seemed heavier, as if they were leaving a part of themselves behind in that place. Clara could not forget the cold touch she had felt on her shoulders, and Lucas looked back every few moments, expecting something or someone to follow them. When they reached the car, they noticed that the clock on the dashboard read exactly midnight, even though they had been there for hours. Raphael, always skeptical, looked at the cloudy sky and muttered, "That was an illusion, right? It can't have been real." Clara didn't answer. She was holding something in her hands, a videotape she didn't remember recording. Trembling, she placed the tape on the back seat, trying to ignore the feeling that it wasn't over yet. Lucas started the car, but it wouldn't start. The engine made a weak sound, as if something was preventing it from starting. Raphael got out to check the hood but came back pale, pointing to the rear window. "The camera, it's over there." Clara turned around immediately. The camera she had thrown into the river was on the back seat, intact, with the recording light blinking. The air got colder inside the car, and suddenly the windows began to fog up as if something was breathing near them. A message began to appear on the fogged windows, written from the inside out. "You never left." The car was filled with a deathly silence. Lucas tried to open the doors, but they were locked. Raphael began to scream while Clara held the camera, not knowing what to do. The rain outside seemed to increase, muffling their sounds. Suddenly, the car was enveloped by the same fog that covered the asylum. The lights outside disappeared and everything around went black. Clara turned on the camera in an attempt to provide light, and the last image she captured was of the face of the figure they had seen earlier, burned, deformed, smiling. They say that no one saw Lucas, Clara, or Raphael again after that night. However, residents near the hill report that, on stormy nights, they can hear voices and see lights flashing inside what must have been an abandoned asylum.